Have you ever looked at Africa's map and noticed those weird, strange lines appearing out of nowhere? One aftermath of colonialism was that Africa was left divided up in the weirdest ways possible, leading to several abnormalities in the borders, and random enclaves and exclaves coming out of nowhere. Not to mention, there are places that have no idea where they even belong. So, join us as we look at 20 oddities of African geography. 1. Do you see this tiny circle right in the middle of South Africa? Well, would you believe me if I tell you that it's a whole separate country of its own? This is Lesotho, one of the world's very few sovereign enclave states, which means its entire land is engulfed by another country. This odd setup isn't just a geographical quirk. This weird arrangement dates back to colonial times, when the British decided to acknowledge the Basotho people's wish for a separate identity from the Boer settlers nearby. Did they care about being completely landlocked by South Africa? Nope, now they're just stuck in the middle, living with the strange consequences. 2. Ceuta is a little slice of Spain chilling on the northern coast of Africa. Now you're probably thinking, what? It's crazy, but it's a European territory located right on the African continent. But how did this even happen? You'll have to go way back in 1415 when Portugal captured Ceuta, but then later Spain took over. It's been a Spanish territory ever since, which might sound simple, but it's not. Morocco wants to lay its claim because they believe Ceuta should be theirs. I can bet this is something you probably never expected. 3. Now, if Ceuta caught you off guard, Melilla is here to double down on the weirdness. At first glance, you might think that this is just any normal region, but it's not. Melilla is another Spanish exclave perched on Africa's northern coast, just like its cousin Ceuta. This city has been under Spanish control since 1497. The fortified borders make it a super strange gateway to Europe for African migrants, so it's not exactly making anybody's life easier. Still, it stands out as one of the weirdest things you'll find in African geography. 4. Take a look at Walvis Bay. Once upon a time, this port was an exclave of South Africa. But do you see it anywhere near South Africa? Well, no, because it was surrounded by Namibia. During the colonial era, the British got their hands on it, all because they were interested in its prime harbor. This action separated Walvis Bay from what was then German Southwest Africa. When Namibia finally gained independence in 1990, Walvis Bay stayed with South Africa until 1994. It's like they were just tossing this whole country around for fun. 5. Here's Cabinda, the intriguing Angolan exclave that's separated from its motherland by a slim piece of the Democratic Republic of Congo. What could possibly happen for this to exist? Well, you can blame the colonial powers that once thought it was a great idea to carve up Africa in the weirdest way possible. So now Cabinda exists as a part of Angola, but isn't actually connected to it by any means. How strange. 6. Ever look at a map and wonder why Gambia is that strange, narrow strip poking into Senegal? Here's the backstory. The British and French decided it was a brilliant idea to shape a country around the Gambia River's navigability. They traced the river like it's some kind of treasure map. That's why Gambia now feels like a long, skinny enclave wrapped inside Senegal. It seems the colonial powers just sliced Africa up without much thought for future realities, doesn't it? 7. Let's look at Bir Tawil, a fascinating region that spreads across Zambia, Angola, Namibia, and Botswana. It traces its roots back to the historic kingdom of the Lozi people. The lines here are more than just squiggles on a map. They reflect the rich cultural and political identity that existed long before colonial interference. When Bir Tawil was merged into Zambia, promises of autonomy weren't kept, sparking calls for independence and some historical grumblings. 8. Zanzibar is straight up strange because the island's part of Tanzania, but Tanzania doesn't really have any control over it. With its own government and distinct cultural identity, Zanzibar was once a sultanate and a pivotal trading hub in the Indian Ocean. Its union with Tanganyika in 1964 to form Tanzania happened only because of politics and economics. But here's the thing, there is nothing linking the two. Zanzibar is an island that is completely surrounded by water, and the distance would probably make it impossible for Tanzania to govern it. 9. Now, let's talk about the Ilemi Triangle. This crazy little piece of land caught in a game of tug-of-war between Kenya, South Sudan, and Ethiopia. This will blow you away, but it's basically a triangle-shaped land that nobody can agree on who actually owns it. There just aren't any clear boundaries. The confusion here all started during colonial times, when borders were drawn with almost no precision. The area is rich in resources and sits in a prime spot, which is why all three countries want to lay their claims. Seriously, who knew drawing straight lines could be so complicated? 10. Let's move over to the Hala'ib Triangle. You see this chink of land? Well, both Egypt and Sudan tried to claim it as their own. The drama here started because of different interpretations of old colonial agreements, and to this day it's been causing chaos. Egypt is running the show here, but Sudan keeps reminding everyone that it has historical and ethnic ties to the land. Isn't it fascinating how you'll never know which side has the rightful claim? It's wild. 11. Here's Bir Tawil, and trust me, it has as one of the strangest stories out there. Why? Well, because it's a strip of land that literally nobody wants. If you think that's bad, the reason behind this is even more crazy. Claiming Bir Tawil would mean giving up claims to the more desirable Hala'ib Triangle. And let's be real, everyone wants the fancy piece of cake, not the crumbs. This unclaimed land is one of the few places on Earth that neither Egypt nor Sudan wants to call their own. Isn't that kinda sad? 12. So, here's the thing. During During the Apartheid era, South Africa was peppered with several bizarre enclaves, like the former Bophuthatswana Bantustan. These weren't just your average towns or regions. They were artificially created territories designed by the apartheid regime for the sole purpose of segregating people based on race. Crazy, right? These enclaves were part of a grand, twisted plan of socio-political engineering. The idea was to create nominally independent homelands for black South Africans, but here's they were often economically unviable and lacked any real political autonomy. It's like being given a kingdom with no power or resources to run it. Now, these enclaves exist as just several little pieces in South Africa, and they have no clue how to assimilate within each other. 13. Next stop, we're looking at the Barku Oasis. This place was once a tiny Libyan island floating in a sea of Chad. Since then, this little patch of desert has changed hands several times over the years between Libya and Chad. Colonial-era decisions turned it into an enclave, which is why you can see that this little piece of land is completely surrounded by another country. In the 1990s, some new treaties switched things up, and Barku Oasis found itself becoming part of Chad once and for all. What a roller coaster. 14. Can you imagine a piece of France just chilling in the Comoros Islands, all the way there in Africa? Mayotte is officially part of France, which is massively confusing given its African location. How did this happen? Well, Mayotte decided to stick with France after some referendums, while its neighbors went the independent route. So, technically, the Comoros Islands aren't part of Africa at all. They're just there thanks to the aftermath of colonialism. It's like finding a little French cafe right in the middle of the jungle. Totally unexpected and fascinating. 15. Now here's Nsumbu National Park in Zambia, but it's not just any ordinary park. This park stretches right into Lake Tanganyika, making it a piece of nature shared by Zambia, Tanzania, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, all three of them. I mean, how often do you find a park that doesn't care about borders and just moves across 3 countries? The park's boundaries are all about overlapping territorial claims, and they just couldn't divide it up because they had to conserve it. So now everybody gets to share it. Sounds fascinating, right? 16. Now here's a little tale about the Kasikili Sedudu Island in the Chobe River. This little island was the center of a big dispute between Botswana and Namibia. Both countries claimed it, and it all boiled down to colonial-era agreements and some pretty confusing interpretations of the river's course. I mean, you can't blame them. It's sandwiched right between them. Eventually, the International Court of Justice stepped in and said, enough is enough, ruling in favor of Botswana, which ended the conflict. But the island's location is as confusing as it gets. 17. Take a look at Ras Doumeira, a hotly contested region between Eritrea and Djibouti. This place is a big deal because it's near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. Whoever controls this area holds a strategic advantage in regional security and trade routes. Interestingly, this piece of land lies right between Eritrea and Djibouti, so to this day, nobody's been able to figure out who it really belongs to. How strange. 18. Lake Malawi, known as Lake Nyasa in Tanzania, is a beautiful lake that is caught up in a tug-of-war between Malawi and Tanzania. Each of them is claiming different parts of the lake, and nobody knows who it really belongs to. It fits right between the borders of the 2 countries and flows through both of them. How could one possibly draw conclusions about where it belongs? As always, boundaries were drawn during the colonial time, and now the people are left confused about how the border between the countries is supposed to divide the lake. It's crazy. 19. Have you ever heard of a place that's still waiting to figure out what country it belongs to? Well, that's Western Sahara for you, a territory in North Africa that's claimed by both Morocco and the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. The chaos began when Spain, the former colonial power, packed up and left in 1975. That's when Morocco and Mauritania decided to jump in, each wanting a piece of the land. But things got complicated when the Polisario Front, representing the Sahrawi people, resisted Morocco's annexation. Now, Western Sahara is one of the last non-self-governing territories in the world. Imagine just how much instability this feud causes. 20. Now look at Western Togoland. From the looks of it, it's just a region in Ghana, but in essence, it's a whole territory of its own. It was originally part of German Togoland, but it was split between British and French control after World War I. Afterwards, they tried to mix it in with Ghana, but Western Togoland did not want that. They just ended up declaring that they want independence and want to exist as a separate country right in between Ghana and Togo. Imagine that. The piece of land just looks like a narrow piece of river, and it's got barely any power or recognition to keep it afloat. That's the end of today's video. Which of these oddities is the strangest for you? Let me know in the comments. And if you liked this video, be sure to check this other video as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.